Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to Choice Not Chance, how to mitigate the risk of selecting a non-enrolling site for your clinical trial. I would like to thank everyone for attending today. My name is Lonnie Brannon, Director of Site Trove at Informus Pharma Intelligence, and I'm delighted to be able to present this today. A few technical items before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to view the recording after the presentation. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please enter them in the box and we will be sure to respond through email after the session. I had the pleasure of presenting this topic at the SCOPE Summit in January of this year and was joined by co-presenter Loot Debee, Study Placement Lead at Janssen. For this webinar, I will be discussing strategies for reducing the risk of selecting a non-enrolling site for your next clinical trial. These strategies are certainly not all-encompassing, however, they are some that we feel are important to review. I will use prostate cancer as a case study in order to highlight these research strategies. Here's a look at the agenda for today. We'll review approved therapies and standard of care, disease epidemiology, and potential challenges in prostate cancer. We'll then review the overall trial landscape, and lastly jump into investigator and trial site selection, competition, trial failures, and new opportunities. So let's start with a brief prostate cancer overview. Prostate cancer is the second most common cancer in American men, with 1 in 7 men receiving a prostate cancer diagnosis during his lifetime. The American Cancer Society's 2016 estimates for prostate cancer in the U.S. are approximately 190,000 new cases and over 26,000 deaths. There are a number of therapies currently available. However, for those with late-stage prostate cancer, new therapies are crucially needed. It is important to understand the standard of care for your countries of interest to ensure it aligns with your drug. Is your competitor's drug the standard of care for your selected countries, and would it therefore be difficult for your drug to penetrate the market? Data Monitor Healthcare looks at the standard of care for late-stage prostate cancer patients in the U.S., Japan, and 5 major EU markets: France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the U.K. ADT, or androgen deprivation therapy, is the standard of care for newly diagnosed stage 3 to 4 prostate cancer, highlighted by the navy blue bars here. 75% of patients receive ADT either alone, as shown in the navy blue, or with another treatment type, as shown by the pink box. Because of this #1 treatment regimen used to treat late-stage prostate cancer within these countries, you must consider whether your drug can be used alongside the treatment. An understanding of the epidemiology of the disease is also critical to confirm if your countries of interest have the patient population matching a study protocol. Here is a look at the global snapshot of the estimated prostate cancer incidence worldwide in 2012. The highest rates are in North America, South America, Western Europe, South Africa, and Australia. North Africa and the majority of the Asia-Pac countries have the lowest prostate cancer incidence rate, with the exception of Japan. Data Monitor Healthcare estimates that in 2016, the U.S. will have the greatest number of total incidence cases with over 248,000, followed by Japan with over 73,000. However, as a whole, the 5 major EU markets had the greatest number of incidence cases of prostate cancer in 2016 with over 260,000. Here is the distribution of prostate cancer patients within the U.S. The majority of patients are located on the eastern seaboard and on the West Coast in San Francisco and Los Angeles. While evaluating the prostate cancer incidence rates in the U.S., it would seem clear to select the U.S. for a trial involving newly diagnosed patients. However, upon deeper analysis, this wasn't the case. In reviewing a case study involving newly diagnosed subjects with high-risk metastatic hormone-naive prostate cancer, early research showed the U.S. as an ideal country for recruiting patients for this study. However, in conducting a deeper analysis, it was found that in the U.S., there's a widespread PSA screening, resulting in early detection of prostate cancer. Therefore, newly diagnosed stage 4 metastatic prostate cancer is relatively uncommon. According to Data Monitor Healthcare, approximately 85% of newly diagnosed prostate cancer cases in the U.S. are actually early stage 1 or stage 2, as shown here. And the U.S. has the smallest percentage of newly diagnosed advanced prostate cancer patients, with 7%. This is why the U.S. was not selected for this particular trial. However, France and Germany have the highest percentage of newly diagnosed stage 4 patients, as shown here, France with 31% and Germany with 32%, and therefore they were selected for the trial. Now let's look at some developments in prostate cancer research. Analyzing the patient populations of the overall trial landscape will provide further insight into the target population for your study protocol. Here is a look at the prostate cancer trial landscape for all phases 2 through 3 industry-sponsored trials in the last 5 years. 64% of trials include late-stage prostate cancer patients, which clearly highlights a focus by sponsors on this patient population. Relevant trends should also be considered, such as immunotherapy, which is an area of great interest in oncology. On the right is a chart looking at all phases 2 through 3 industry-sponsored immunotherapy prostate cancer trials initiated in the last 5 years and the treatment type studied. There are a total of 17 trials with 14 currently active. 7 active trials include a checkpoint inhibitor, 7 trials involved an anti-cancer vaccine, 2 studies involved multiple therapy types, and 1 involved kinase inhibitors. Another focus within clinical research, including prostate cancer, is personalized medicine and the use of pharmacogenomic or pharmacogenetic biomarkers. At the time of this analysis, there were 15 ongoing and planned industry-sponsored phases 2 through 3 prostate cancer trials involving pharmacogenomic and/or pharmacogenetic analysis. Out of these 15 trials, all included late-stage prostate cancer patients. Clovis Oncology had the greatest number of ongoing studies with 3, 2 in phase 2 and 1 in phase 3. Merck had 2 trials, both in phase 2, and the NIH also had 2 in phase 2. 16 additional sponsors had 1 ongoing or planned trial, which highlights a strong interest in biomarker trials compared to the previous 5-year span, which only held 7 trials. When planning a clinical trial, it is also important to review the selected trial locations from prior research. Here we're looking at the number of completed and terminated industry-sponsored phases 2 through 3 metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer trials in the last 5 years, represented by the pink bar, compared to the number of ongoing and planned studies by country, represented by the purple bar. There has been a vast increase in late-stage prostate cancer trials within the last 5 years, with all countries showing an increase except for Hungary. Poland and Brazil are showing over 4 times the number of studies ongoing and planned compared to the last 5 years. The UK, France, US, and Canada all have greater than or close to a 1.5% increase. Benchmarking your trial to similar past studies is also crucial. What design elements are most successful and what didn't work so well? Compare your study protocol with key similar trials by incorporating similar inclusion and exclusion criteria. Janssen was planning a trial in which the patients were diagnosed with high-risk localized prostate cancer. A proposed exclusion criteria excluded patients with a Charlson comorbidity score greater than 3. For this protocol, Janssen asked the Trial Trove Assay Analyst Service to compare 26 similar trials with regards to comorbidity score, age range, and actual median age. The results, which are summarized here, found that 21 of the 26 benchmark trials did not have comorbidity scoring in their exclusion criteria. Looking at the results for the median actual age of the patients that participated in the 26 trials, 4 trials provided the results of 68 to 70 years. According to Data Monitor Healthcare, the incidence of prostate cancer is the highest between 60 to 75 years. Checking the age-adjusted Charlson comorbidity score, the age group from 60 to 70 years already has a comorbidity score of 3 points. Therefore, revisiting the proposed exclusion criterion of a Charlson comorbidity score greater than 3 was certainly required, since the target population for the proposed trial primarily consists of men between 60 and 70 years, and most would already have a score of 3 because of their age group. If they had one additional comorbidity, which is very often the case for patients 60 to 70 years, then they would be excluded from participating in the study. Since the exclusion criterion would exclude most patients with prostate cancer, it would have limited recruitment tremendously. Therefore, the team at Janssen removed this exclusion criteria from the proposed protocol. Once you've reviewed and analyzed the clinical trial landscape, epidemiology, and standard of care, it is important to next determine where the experienced investigators are located. It is vital to identify the best investigators with experience conducting trials matching your study protocol. SiteTrove, which now has over 400,000 investigators and over 100,000 trial sites, has developed a proprietary algorithm to prioritize investigators based on their trial experience. It then reports results into 3 tiers, with Tier 1 representing investigators with the highest probability to perform well in a trial within a given disease, compared with investigators in Tier 2 or Tier 3. This view is of the next generation SiteTrove, which will identify investigators with experience in industry-sponsored Phase 2 through 3 prostate cancer studies. There are currently 6,637 investigators who have Phase 2 through 3 industry-sponsored prostate cancer experience. When limiting results to metastatic castrate-resistant experience, there are 3,853 investigators. Using SiteTrove's investigator prioritization, we can further refine the results to identify the Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators within this pool, which ends up being 2,747 investigators. This map depicts the global distribution of metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer experienced investigators, represented by the size of the blue dots. The greatest experience is in the U.S., with over 1,400 investigators, and Canada also falls within the top 5 countries with 107 investigators, followed closely by heavy experience in Western Europe. China, Japan, Brazil, and Australia also have a great deal of experience, with all countries ranging between 50 and 80 investigators. If your study protocol specifies additional inclusion criteria, you can further refine these results by including a specific therapeutic class or mechanism of action. Here I've highlighted the number of investigators with immunotherapy experience, 522. SiteTrove also captures all FDA regulatory actions against investigators and any actions against investigators taken by their state medical licensing board as available. After removing any immunotherapy experienced investigators with a red or yellow regulatory action, we're left with 481 Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators. Additionally, 383 investigators have experience with pharmacogenomic or pharmacogenetic biomarker studies. And after removing any investigators with red or yellow regulatory actions, we're left with 368 Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators. Reviewing the competitive trial landscape, the geographical distribution of investigators can provide a directional approach for identifying potential countries to run your study by highlighting those countries with very little ongoing trial activity, but with a large pool of experienced Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators. Here, we've overlaid the prioritized investigator results with the ongoing and planned metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer Phase 2 through 3 competitive trial activity, depicted by the pink heat map. The greatest ongoing trial activity is in the U.S. with 47 trials, as well as Western Europe, Asia-Pac, and Australia. Once you identify a country or countries of interest, reviewing the patient pool that each SiteTrove investigator has access to can provide an even more targeted approach when making those final site selection decisions. Does a high-tiered investigator correlate to a larger volume of patients? Here, we're looking at the U.S. Tier 1 in blue and Tier 2 in yellow, metastatic castrate-resistant prostate cancer experienced investigators, as well as the distribution of prostate cancer patients in pink. You may wish to target the areas of the country with heavy Tier 1 investigators and who have a larger available patient pool, for example, cities in California, like San Francisco and Los Angeles, or states like Texas, Michigan, and parts of the East Coast. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, Loot DeBee, study placement lead from Janssen, co-presented with me at SCOPE this past year and provided insight into Janssen's investigator selection process. I will now discuss the subsequent slides on her behalf. To support the investigator identification process, Janssen has developed an internal tool named Investigator Profiler, which compiles all the data known by investigators in a certain disease indication. The goal of the tool is to optimize site selection for participation in an upcoming study. As depicted here, Investigator Profiler is the integration of different databases. Through SiteTrove, Janssen attains data on past investigator experience within a given disease, as well as investigators who have been involved in trials within the last 5 years. To distinguish the high performers from the non-enrollers among identified investigators within that given disease area, additional data sources are included. Janssen CTMS provides the internal enrollment performance data from their past participation in trials with Janssen. Insight into the investigator enrollment performance of some other trials run by pharma companies is provided through a partnership with those groups. The tool also incorporates data on investigator participation on key benchmark trials, which might be opportunities for an upcoming Janssen study, as well as data on investigator participation with ongoing competitive trials to identify those investigators that they should avoid. For investigator, Janssen enters feasibility results and whether the investigator is part of a network. And lastly, and very importantly, they indicate external and internal inspection data per investigator. By using the tool, clinical trial teams have a lot of data at their fingertips to make a seriously weighted decision with good rationale for their site selection. Increasing the number of high enrolling sites will have an impact on when your trial will complete recruitment, as highlighted here in this table. Using high enrolling sites also reduces the study cycle time determined by the last patient in, or LPI date, and can result in a gain of months in the overall process. Including more high enrolling sites means you might reduce the total number of sites needed for your study, which in turn reduces the overall cost of your trial. The ultimate goal, of course, being to reduce costs and time to market, getting the drug earlier to the patient while having positive financial impact. The competing landscape of your ongoing trial changes all the time, so it is not a luxury to keep a close eye on what is happening out there, checking whether or not it can have an impact. This section contains 2 case studies that impacted Janssen trials after the trials were initiated. The first case was an ongoing trial in hormone-naive patients, also called hormone-sensitive patients, with metastasized prostate cancer. The protocol is outlined here. At the 2014 Annual American Society of Clinical Oncology meeting, the results of the charted trial were presented. These results were breaking news described in the media as a home run in prostate cancer research. Paradigm changing, unprecedented, and a pretty big deal. The outcome of the charted trial found that in metastasized hormone-sensitive prostate cancer patients, docetaxel and ADT gave better cancer control than ADT alone. Janssen felt the impact immediately. The news was announced in June 2014, and Janssen's recruitment figures declined even starting that month. Luckily, they had enrolled about 75% of their trial, but if they had not been that far along, they would have needed to initiate additional sites or amend the protocol to finish the trial. Another striking example of the impact the competing landscape can have on your ongoing study is Janssen's experience with Ordoronel. Ordoronel, or TAK-700, was a drug from Takeda Millennium in development for prostate cancer and a direct competitor to Janssen's drug. In September 2014 came the breaking news that Takeda Millennium had decided to stop further development of Ordoronel in prostate cancer after recent phase 3 trials of the drug in advanced prostate cancer patients failed to meet their primary endpoint. As a result, patient accrual into the ongoing phase 3 Ordoronel trial closed. This trial was a direct competitive trial to Janssen's ongoing study, so when patient accrual was stopped in the participating sites, they informed the clinical trial team that the 297 identified sites listed here in the trial profile might be considered for participation in their study. These became go-to sites, an opportunity for Janssen's trial. As you can see, there are a number of strategies for enrollment success, and no single approach will be 100% guarantee that a site will meet enrollment requirements. However, having the most comprehensive data at your fingertips and taking the time to research and analyze the data will help you make the most informed decision. Understand the standard of care, epidemiology, and overall trial landscape as an initial starting point. Know the common treatment options in each country for your patient population. Is a competitor's drug the standard of care? Does the country delay treatment until the disease is in a more advanced stage? Compare the standard of care with disease incidence rate to confirm that your country or countries of interest have patients matching your protocol. Benchmark with past trials for similar diseases and with similar trial designs to learn what worked and what did not work. Identify and select the best investigators. By utilizing site-driven investigator prioritization, you have the ability to identify Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators who have the greatest experience matching your study protocols and the highest probability to perform well. Prioritization allows you to limit your search as specific as you would like. Use site-driven data as a directional approach with your own internal data sources to make the best site selection decisions. Analyze Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators globally with an overlay of ongoing trial activity matching your study protocol. To help identify investigators with a high level of experience but very few ongoing studies, and also to identify those investigators who are not currently tied up in a competitive study. Review patient data on a country level and identify the Tier 1 and Tier 2 investigators with access to the higher number of patients. And lastly, understand what your competitors are doing. It's important to monitor the active trial landscape during the lifetime of your study. A positive outcome in a competing trial can affect enrollment in your trial. A competitive trial that is terminated and stops enrollment can open up new opportunities for your study. Always keep researching and analyzing, not only during the planning and initiation stages, but throughout your entire trial. It really is choice, not chance. Ensure you are researching and digging deeper into the data and that you have the most comprehensive data at your disposal so you're confident in the decisions that you make for your next clinical trial. That concludes the webinar for today. As mentioned earlier, please do add your questions to the box and they will be answered through email. And thank you again for attending. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.